Welcome back to the Tool World Podcast. I'm your host, David Ju, and I'm here with Master Ju.
Hello, hello, Mr. Ju.
Hello. All right, this week we're going to be taking a look at the jumps into X stance in the patterns.
Like in Yolo and Taige?
Yeah, I guess we could just start there. I mean, you have quite a few.
Well, there are a few, but
it
first shows up in Yolo.
Right. And you have two different variations, I think, or maybe two kind of ideas about them. One, and we're mostly looking at like how the feet fall into the X stance. Not so much about the angle. Well, I guess a little bit about the angle, but
I think they are correlated.
But in Yogok, let's start there.
Okay.
You jump, and it's usually like 1 foot first, the next foot follows.
Right, because you're actually jumping towards C in that case, right? That particular pattern. You are covering distance, like 1.5 shoulder width. So your body momentum is going forward in that direction. So you kind of land. It's kind of like a flying kick. It's a little bit different, but you're moving forward, you're landing. You don't necessarily land with both feet at the same time. I mean, it's close, but not exactly.
Well, it's
right?
really hard to do that.
Yeah, it is hard
Like
to
if
do
you're
that.
jumping for distance,
It's hard.
you really can't get both at the same time.
Yeah, so in Yogok, I kind of think of it, the foot is actually pointed forward to kind of help you, stop you from falling forward. If your foot was pointed like at a 90-degree angle, then it's more like all that pressure's on the side of your foot and your knee.
Yeah.
And you can't really, it doesn't stop that. I mean, your feet have to be pointed forward to stop, like to push a car. You don't do it sideways really. Or you don't stop somebody or something rolling at you. You don't kind of push it to the side as much. You need both feet. Walking stance is a good example of that forward momentum. And so when we're covering distance, I think that also applies here. So the foot is more pointed forward. It lands, the other one sets down, more like a balance to help you recover that balance so you don't just topple over.
My kind of thought about these jumps is actually, the jump is kind of just an extension of a step.
Yes,
right?
I would agree with that.
So it's a lot longer. So that's why if you take a step, 1 foot has to lead, 1 foot has to follow, right? So the jumping is going to, it's kind of the same, right? 1 foot has to lead, 1 foot follows, right? And I think that's kind of leading into the next point of Taige. So Taige, you look at like the Kamdo videos, and they do both feet at the same time, right? And so when I view that one, I'm kind of thinking that it's not as much of a step because I'm going more of an up-down position, and it's more like a jump. So if I wanted to do like a flying kick, I can do a flying kick and land with both feet on the ground.
Right.
And so this is kind of like the same. I'm not taking a step. I'm just jumping straight up, right? And that's why both feet can land at the same time.
Right. No, I would agree with that. I think when you look at Taige, it is covering jumping over something, and you're not covering distance. And you also notice that when you jump, you're jumping towards C, but you've got to do the block towards A. So you've actually got to jump, rotate the body, and then you're executing a pressing block towards A. So your feet actually has to rotate towards A. So we don't have to worry about that falling over because we're not covering a lot of distance. We're just jumping over something. It's like you're falling into it. So does that make sense, what we're talking about? Specifically Yogok and Taige. Yogok, again, we're covering ground. And so the foot is mostly pointed forward to help you from falling over.
Yeah.
In Taige, it's clearing an object, and you land with both feet basically at the same time because you're not really covering ground. You're just going straight up, and a little bit of ground, but not a lot.
Right.
So you can land with both feet, and the foot position is going to be in that case facing towards A. So again, it's not that length or that forward momentum.
Right. So those are both jumps.
Right.
But we also have something called a jumping motion.
Right.
So you see that in Juche Kodong.
Right.
After the high reverse hook kick, and then you jump down, right? And then you also see it in Yongge. Similarly, after a side piercing kick, it's a jumping motion, right? So what is the difference between the jumping motion versus a jump?
Yeah, so I think the main difference, again, jumping like in Yogok or Taige, is you're covering distance or you're covering an object or
a height.
Height.
Yeah, okay.
in a jumping motion, it's a similar kind of a motion, but not really. If you look at those two techniques, you execute the kick, it's like you just set that foot down, but it's kind of in a jumping motion. It's not really, you're not really like jumping, like you're trying to gain ground. You just kick and you kind of like, the foot falls down and the other foot falls into that X stance.
Right.
Kind of what I think it is. It's not, again, not covering height or distance. So if you look at that pattern, you don't see you're not moving that much.
Yeah, right.
It's almost like you kick, you set that foot down, and then you put your other foot behind to create the X stance. But that's not the case because that's a little bit different. And if you look at that too, in a jumping motion, the X stance, after you do those particular kicks and in that X stance, the non-supporting leg or the non-weighted bearing leg is behind the foot and not in front. Unlike in Po-on where that would be in front. When you step, when you step, it's in front. Okay. When you jump, it's behind.
So by saying jumping motion, it insinuates that the foot has to be behind the leg.
That's right.
Oh, I see.
As opposed to in front.
Right, because you could set it down
and then step
in front and do the strike, right?
You could.
Yeah.
I mean, theoretically.
Theoretically, but by saying the jumping motion defines it a little bit more, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I guess this might sound really stupid here, but they say jumping motion. Is that something in line that's going to be like fast motion, continuous motion? Could you say that there's a jumping motion? Because it does define it. It does define it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about it has to be like a 1-2.
Right.
It has to be. It indicates that the foot is behind it, right? So is that not kind of similar to like a continuous motion of, it's talking about how these two techniques are interrelated, so it kind of defines how you are doing this technique.
Yeah, maybe because like when you think about like Warang, you do the high turning kick. That's done in a fast motion.
Yeah.
Right? It's a little bit easier to kind of describe that when we talk about fast motions. I think it's a little bit easier to talk about the sine wave with the hand techniques. But when you're talking about like fast motion with the legs, it's more like tempo. Right? And in some ways, what you're saying in jumping motion is at a tempo.
For the stance,
For the stance, right? As opposed to like a regular motion? Is it more of a tempo? Maybe, it could be. I never really thought of it that way. But the technique does have to be 1-2. It's not 1-2. It's fairly quick. So what you're saying, continuous motion is a faster, for me, I kind of think it is a faster motion, but for me, continuous motion is more of is related to defensive techniques. Fast motion is usually related to when we talk about hand techniques anyway, is usually associated with an attack.
Yeah. Well, and then usually they connect like two different techniques together. I don't know if
they are kind of connected, and continuous motion is the same.
Right, but I would say these two techniques aren't. Like if I do a side piercing kick into the downward strike with the back fist,
the two techniques.
It wouldn't say like jumping motion just because of.
They're related to each other.
Yeah, they're not really related. I mean, when you have connecting motion, you're doing the scooping block into the punch, right? Those two, application-wise, are very related.
Right.
If I'm doing like the low side block, rising block, continuous motion, those two are, I think.
Fast motion,
punching
too. It's like they're related.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know if doing the side piercing kick into the downward strike, if those are related. It just happens that they are both.
They are kind of in a way because what you're doing is you execute that side piercing kick and you actually kind of like fall into that back fist strike.
Right.
But you're jumping. You do the jumping motion as you fall into that back fist strike. So in a way, I guess it is kind of related.
Maybe. Anyways, we'll wrap it up there. Yeah, you let us know your guys' thoughts. That was just a spur of the moment question I had. Anyways, don't forget to be safe.
Keep training.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Take one.